Well, it's time for another top 10 list of books. This is one that has been requested several times and in several different ways. So I'm kind of compiling really two book lists into one. So one of you out there had said, could I do a top 10 list of MK Ultra books? And then I think someone else was saying a while back, could I do a top 10 list of mind control books? And really, they're kind of the same thing, except MK Ultra is a very specific program. The only problem with that is that really narrows the focus, and then there's a lot of, it gets really murky when you drill down on just MK Ultra and then proving how much of that is genuinely MK Ultra. So in this, I will be doing the top 10 mind control / MK Ultra, and I'll be explaining some of the tie-ins as I go through this. But I think mind control is a better starting point for this just because there is, as you'll see as I go down through this, there's a lot of offshoots of this. So again, MK Ultra gets so specific, and when you really get into the history of the whole MK Ultra program and how that was discovered, there's a lot of gray areas there about what is provable, verifiable MK Ultra stuff. So now, if you just tuned in, you're wondering what on earth is this guy talking about? So MK Ultra was the CIA's mind control program, allegedly an experimental program to find out if they could, in fact, monkey with someone's mind to the point that they could make them a mind-controlled assassin, or more importantly, their biggest aim was to see if they could override free will and self-preservation so that someone would do something against their own self-preservation that could possibly even get them killed. And there's a lot of information that has come out, a lot of declassified documents about the spending for MK Ultra, and there was a lot of other program names and certain designations and things within that. But because that was so secretive, there's a lot of deliberate disinformation around MK Ultra, and Monarch is one that gets even harder to pin down as a program and how much of that is verifiable. So what I have here is my top 10 books on, and there goes the clock. Excuse my antique clock here. And I'd also like to point out it is effectively fall again, and cooler weather has arrived here in West Texas. So I have outfitted myself accordingly for this. So I am definitely one that is looking forward to cooler temperatures all around. But all that aside, I have 10 books here, and then I have some runners up over here that are kind of supporting information. And to me, the whole mind control topic is a fascinating area of study, and it has a lot of really dark implications. I mean, you start with just one book, one decent book in this pile, and it's going to lead you to a lot of other things. And really, this could easily have been, my top 50 books on mind control, because there is just so much there. So I'm going to start with the classic. This is Walter Boart's, and I'm going to have to adjust my camera down just a little bit. This is Walter Boart's book, Operation Mind Control. And this was, I believe, published in 1977 or 78. I remember because I was in probably like kindergarten when this came out. 1978. And this is noteworthy in that this is kind of one of the first more mainstream books on the topic of mind control. And this was put out by Fontana originally. And I think there's a couple other publishers that published it. Dell Publishing did the first edition, or in Great Britain, and anyway, and then William Collins Sons and Co. Also printed this, but this is probably one of the first mainstream broad spectrum books on someone really just a regular guy, regular journalist, jumping headfirst into the phenomenon of mind control research. And again, he wasn't the first guy, but he was probably the first that really brought it more mainstream. The hunt for the Manchurian Candidate was really kind of the first one, but Walter Boart really got a lot deeper into a lot more broad spectrum. And this is his just personal journey, going around interviewing people, everybody from alleged assassins to victims, you name it. Lots of very fascinating information in this. And if you find this interesting, definitely get the follow-up. There's a researcher's edition that he came out with in 1995, and I've reviewed that elsewhere. That definitely takes this to a whole other level. But this one, for a long time, this was very difficult to get. I think this still, the cheapest you could probably get it for is maybe 30, 40 bucks. The story behind this is allegedly when this book came out, the CIA tried to buy it up off the newsstands and kind of keep it out of the public eye. So there are rumors that a lot of the copies that are popping up now on eBay and Amazon are actually those copies that the agency purchased and then leaked out slowly over time when there was no reason to have a monopoly on that anymore. But overall, excellent information in this. This is, as with all of the books in this stack, this is one of those things where a lot of these authors, I think pretty much everybody, and I'll explain kind of my different take on some of these authors through here. There's a lot of authors out there that talk about this sort of topic that I think are coming at this fairly honestly. And you may not agree with all of their conclusions, and sometimes they've been deliberately misled with disinformation and all of that stuff that you have to be aware of. But overall, I think these are all pretty solid sources of information. Now, one of the very interesting things in this that I think is worth the price of the book alone is his account of the Assassins cult. And I think I have that dog-eared in here. And I've talked about this before. This is in chapter 17, The Patriotic Assassin. He has a whole section on in 1298, Marco Polo returned from his Asiatic travels with a tale of assassins who were motivated by an unusually clever technique. And then he goes on to explain this technique, and I'm just going to summarize here, but basically saying that the way these guys were trained, and this is where we get the term assassins, is these guys, there was this mountain fortress that the local townspeople, they would seek out, young men in the town that appeared to be decent candidates, and they would drug them and take them to this castle, to this fortress. And when these guys awoke from this drugged state, they would be in this beautiful garden with wine and beautiful women and all the fancy rich foods they had never had access to. And then they were drugged again and taken back out into the regular world again. And then a prophet or somebody would approach them and tell them that they had seen paradise, that they had actually had been given a glimpse of paradise. And now, if they follow through with this goal that they're going to be given, this task, usually an assassination, killing some public figure, that they would return there and that they would get to return to paradise. And this, of course, is where we get the whole 72 virgins and all that. That is from the Assassins cult. And that was how they motivated these guys, with a combination of hashish, which is where the assassin thing, also the name for that came from. But very fascinating take on that, because if you just take that general formula of the way that was done, where these guys were given drugs, they're basically roofied, taken to this castle, and wined and dined with beautiful women and drugs and all this other stuff that they had no comprehension of course, psychedelic drugs back then. So being in an altered state and being around all these beautiful women and having access to all these rich, wonderful foods, and then being told that's paradise is pretty believable. And then the only way they could return was if they died in the act of the task they were given. So we want you to kill this prince or this dignitary or whatever. And when you do that, and of course they're probably going to be taken out by that guy's security, they will then return to paradise. So horrible, horrible situation there for the young men brought into that. But you can see where a young country boy could be easily tricked into that with the right, again, psychedelic drugs or just drugs in general. And I can't remember if he says specifically what they were drugging them with. But you can see the allure of how that would work. And that formula, I'm sure, has only been improved upon in the last 800 years. So moving right along, we next have Hypnotism by George H. Estabrooks. Now, those of you who follow the channel, you're going to see some repeats in this. I've tried to keep this list as fresh as possible, but there's some overlap that I just can't avoid, and this is one of them. So this is Hypnotism by George H. Estabrooks. And this, I have several copies of this. This is an incredibly important book. This was originally published in, I believe, 1943, and this, of course, is a reprint. This is from 1957, but the original was from 1943. And George Estabrooks did a lot of work with the OSS, the predecessor to the CIA, for hypnotism and using hypnotism to create hypnotic couriers for World War II. And in this, there is a chapter that is, again, super important. That is called, there's, of course, the basic nature of hypnotism, medical uses of hypnotism, hypnotism in crime, and then we have hypnotism in warfare. And that chapter is all about using hypnotism to create what he refers to as a super spy, and how he's very cryptic about it, but talks about how he knows how to use hypnotism to split a personality and create multiple personalities. And the example he gives of this, what he calls a super spy, is taking someone and programming them to have these different personalities. And for instance, of course, this being in World War II, and with the Russians being kind of the boogeyman to be at that point, but he uses communism as a jumping off point for this. But that you would have this one personality type that is very patriotic, very loyal American, and he's the primary personality. But then you have personality B that's like an offshoot of that, but he's actually a very loyal communist, and he genuinely believes that he is a diehard communist. Well, the hypnotist can bring either A or B out into the front as needed. So if he makes personality B the primary personality, personality B is the hardline communist that will go to all the meetings, go to all the rallies, and basically he genuinely believes, he is a true believer in the communist cause, and goes and does all the things, and then he can come back and personality A is brought out by the hypnotist and debriefed. And now personality A is trained to spy on personality B. So personality B has no knowledge of any other personality. Personality B is just the communist guy that does his thing and goes about his business. Personality A, however, is watching personality B and then gives a full report on that whenever he is debriefed. And he talks about the genius of this being that personality B, the communist, could be literally tortured to death and never divulge anything because he doesn't know that he is a spy. So again, some pretty dark implications to that. But that alone, that chapter alone, is worth running down this book. But again, that is Hypnotism by George H. Estabrooks. And I have a couple of other of his books around too that I have yet to review. And in looking for some of these, I found some of those and realized this is another one I have yet to review on its own. This has been, I think I got this, good night, probably 15 years ago at least. And before that, I had the PDF version of this. This is The Manipulation of Human Behavior. And this was originally published in 1961. And this is a compilation of essays by a variety of guys. But I mainly got this because back during the Bush administration, during the first Gulf War and all the torture scandal, any of you all remember all the waterboarding fiasco and all that, when all that came out, somewhere in the shuffle there, it came out that this book was considered kind of the Bible of modern interrogation techniques. So I got it. And it does have some interesting articles that never really push the envelope too far into anything like really insane like some of these other books. But this is a good source, kind of original source material to see kind of how these guys think about interrogation and, and gathering information from people under hostile circumstances, shall we say. So this is one that I will definitely have to come back, reread this again, and do a proper review just on this, because I do remember some interesting passages in this, but I want to confirm them before I cut loose on that. Now, this is where we get into a little weirder area here. And I'd like to take a break here too to point out that in this pile, I have several what I call kind of original source material, like George Estabrooks and this Manipulation of Human Behavior book. And there's some others in here too that I think that's really important. Those of you that are curious about these topics and you want to really get into researching this stuff, it's as dry of reading as stuff like some of this is. It's really important to read a lot of this original source material and make your own judgment calls and draw your own conclusions. Because you may find that some of the kind of professional conspiracy authors will sometimes overlook things, sometimes willfully, sometimes accidentally, but real important to go and as much as you can verify that original source material so you make sure that you're not just drawing a conclusion based on what author X said. So anyway, moving right along. Now, again, this is where things get a little weird because this is where we start getting into the overlap of Satanism. And Satanism, I know, is kind of one of those easily dismissed phrases, but ritual abuse and all that. You'll notice when you start digging into the topic of mind control, there's a lot of overlap between ritual abuse, torture, snuff films, and mind control. All those things wind up swirling around together. And you find there's a lot of overlap in the world of ritual abuse cases and alleged CIA activity, Mossad activity, and other stuff like that. So that's one of those areas when you start seeing that connection between those things, you start seeing that there's a reason that there is a full court press to dismiss any kind of ritual abuse case as some kind of crazy modern hysteria, because as soon as you start pulling at that thread, a lot of stuff starts to come to light. So this is Forensic Aspects of Dissociative Identity Disorder. And this is all about dissociative identity disorder as a byproduct of torture, ritual abuse, and that sort of thing. And really frustrating on this, I had not dog-eared. I've only dog-eared one place in this book. I'm pretty sure it was this book that had an account of a military guy that was being treated by a counselor that had multiple personalities that were linked to the kind of mind control stuff, like military mind control. And he was seeing a regular civilian counselor after he had retired, and she helped him work through some of this. And I can't remember for sure if that's in this book or not. But overall, this is an excellent book on just the forensic aspects of that and really getting into dissociative disorder is the polite way to say multiple personalities. Then we have A New Breed, Satellite Terrorism in America. And this is by Dr. John Hall. And I had forgotten about this until one of my daughters was asking me about mind control books. She had just finished 1996 by Gloria Naylor, and she was looking for something else comparable. And this is a relatively quick read. And this one I found interesting because this one, he lived down in San Antonio when this all took place, and does a pretty good job of documenting his experience of being the victim of gang stalking, him and his girlfriend, and just all the weird stuff that happened to them in the course of that. And there's actually some interviews with him. If you look him up on YouTube, you'll probably find some of his interviews, and that's what caught my attention. Overall, excellent firsthand account. Very soberly related account of someone going through this sort of thing, being the victim of advanced mind control techniques and that sort of thing. So excellent for that alone. So now this is another one that gets a little into the overlap of ritual abuse and some of the occult angle of like ritualized crime and that sort of thing, and the CIA. This is MC Realities, and MC, of course, being short for Mind Control Realities, and this is by H. Michael Sweeney, and he's also the author of The Professional Paranoid, which I have also not reviewed. And this is one that I need to go back and reread and review this one. This is one I've been reluctant to review until I reread it, because I read this and actually read it and reread it back in 2010. And this one, if I remember right, there's one he had that had some pictures in it. Maybe it's not this one. He has a couple of different books that I have, but one of them has pictures of confiscated mind control equipment that they were able to get from a house that was involved in gang stalking. So that was, unfortunately, I don't think it might be on his website where he has those pictures. But this is an excellent book just about the CIA's use of mind control, kind of what the state of the art was when this was written. And this was written in 2006. So almost 20 years old, but excellent information in this just about mind control programs. And this is a good blend of kind of his research in looking at, as a private investigator, looking at some of the mind control cases and working with a lot of survivors of mind control abuse of that sort of technology. So, and one of the other things that you start to run into when you start researching a lot of this topic is you start figuring out, and this is another one of the reasons why it's so hard to pin this down to just MK Ultra, because you start to see that this goes way beyond the CIA and the Mossad or MI6 or any of the other intelligence agencies or NSA. You start getting into private groups, private corporations that have access to this sort of technology. And you also get into private, very wealthy families that have access to some of this technology. And that's important to remember in this. It's not as simple as just this monolithic one intelligence agency doing all these horrible things, that you have other factions that are sometimes fighting between each other. But just like magicians who are rival magicians, they don't give away each other's tricks. So it's important to remember when you think, well, if that was true, I'd see that all over the news. Well, no, you wouldn't. Now, moving right along. Now, this again, then now we're getting more further over into the occult side of it. And this is Cult and Ritual Abuse by James Randall Noblitt and Pamela Sue Perskin. I think I'm saying her name right. And this is much more specific to just the ritual abuse side of things. And I've talked about this book in the past, but I cannot recommend it enough. This is an excellent review of a lot of evidence of ritual abuse and case specifics. In fact, just today, someone was asking me about where I was getting some of the information about perpetrators wearing different costumes and things like that. I believe some of that is in this book, But that's one of those things that's spread out across a lot of different places. But James Randall Noblitt, I think I'm saying his name right, Dr. Noblitt, and I believe he is now relocated to California, but he actually had a practice in my old stomping grounds of Richardson, Texas. And there were several major cases that I actually remember being in the news back when I was a kid. And it's fascinating to go back and reread those. And he was actually an expert witness in several of those cases and hearing his firsthand accounts of those cases. So really important information, because again, there you start to see this overlap of obviously like mind control stuff, but then you start seeing that the practical application really overlaps a lot with occult knowledge. Some of these things being like the ability to split a personality, some of that goes back hundreds, if not thousands of years. These old, like the Egyptian Book of the Dead and things like that. So very interesting, very good information in this. And this, there's also, he has an updated version that I've reviewed elsewhere on the channel. If you just search cult and ritual abuse on my channel, you'll find it. But there's a newer version that's basically an entirely different book that's really good also. Lots of good updated information in that as well. But cannot recommend this enough. And this was, I believe, originally from the late 90s or like 2000. Oh, 2000. So this is from 2000. But this is a good one to read to really dispel the idea of the satanic panic. And, you know, that verbiage, satanic panic, didn't really come into play. Really, I didn't hear that until like the 2000s. Maybe it was said before then, but that whole satanic panic, using that was a way to try to knock the legs out from under anyone digging into all of this kind of mind control stuff. Because the more you dig into that, if you're dealing with child abuse and you start pulling at that thread, it starts going some crazy places. And a good example of that, and he talks about this case a little bit in this book, is there was a daycare case, a ritual abuse daycare case down in, I think it's Fran Keller. And I think it was not Country Walk, but it was a daycare in, if you look up Fran Keller and her husband or boyfriend or whatever, I forget what his name was, but Fran Keller, I remember that for sure. But they had a daycare, and several of the kids made allegations that not only were they doing, the husband and wife or the boyfriend and girlfriend doing stuff to them, to the kids, but also there was like a state policeman and some other guys that would also participate in this. And the other thing that I found really interesting about that case, and this I don't think is in this book, this is in an old Texas Monthly article that I have around here somewhere about it, that when these kids were being abused, that one of the guys that was actually in the kids talked about this guy reading from a book about how to do what they were doing to the kids. And I found that especially interesting that these people were doing, literally using a playbook for what they were doing. And again, I'm pretty sure that's in a Texas Monthly article from the early 90s. But that's another one of those, if you're a serious researcher and student of these things, I highly recommend when you run across these cases, go on eBay, go wherever you can find it and look up, see if you can find old periodicals and look up some of these original cases, because it was not always the consensus that this was mass hysteria. So a lot of that has been applied retroactively. Now, there were a lot of the cases where you can tell there was damage control being done from the start, but there was still so much evidence that they had to take it seriously. And that case down in Austin with Fran Keller is one of them. And they were a husband and wife that I think somewhere in like 2011, 12, somewhere in there, around very close to the same time as the West Memphis Three, were not fully exonerated, but released with time served or something. Some really strange stuff with a lot of those cases. But anyway, that's topic for another video. Now, moving right along. Now, this is more proper mind control stuff. This was one of the first books I ever got on the topic of mind control. This is Mind Control, World Control by Jim Keith. And I believe this is from 1999. or 97. And this is one I've talked about in several other books, book lists. This is an excellent kind of overview of the topic. So if you're new to this, this is a good starting point. Jim Keith, he has kind of a funny writing style. It's not always just a really clear narrative. He writes kind of in chunks of information, which I like a lot just because you can easily pick this book up and start just about anywhere in it and just read these sections of information. And he covers a lot of stuff from brain implants to hypnotism. In fact, he was the one that mentioned George Estabrook's book about hypnotism. So a lot of good information there just to go through this and find his source material. But I remember this kind of blew my mind. When I first got this book, I want to say it was either fall of 2000 or spring of 2001. And it blew my mind that the whole idea of free will was just completely upset by a lot of this. And at first, when I first started reading this, I really thought that I wanted to dismiss it outright because it just seemed so out there. And then the more I would try to find stuff to disprove some of the stuff he was saying, the more I would find proof of it. So excellent overview of the subject. And again, if you're just getting into this is a good starting point for this. And this is put out by Adventures Unlimited, so relatively easy book to get, at least last time I checked. Now, this is one that's a very curious book because it is a fictionalized account of what author Gloria Naylor said actually happened to her. And Gloria Naylor was a relatively mainstream author that was actually featured on Oprah's book club, and she wrote several pretty mainstream books. And then she had this strange experience where she kind of dropped out of society for a little while, and when she came back, she wrote this book called 1996, and it was all about her experiences in the year 1996. And she claims that in that time period, she was subject to extreme forms of like mind control, gang stalking, and that sort of thing. And this is an excellent, sober, firsthand account of gang stalking. And she's still not 100% clear, or still wasn't by the time she wrote this book, as to why she was even chosen. She kind of guesses at why she thinks it might have happened in the book, but she's never 100% certain why exactly she became the target of this. Fascinating book, and really, when I say fictionalized account, it's mainly in that she does a lot of giving voice to what she thinks was happening behind the scenes. So she tells her side of the story, and then she has to kind of create the perpetrator's side of the story. But I think she does a pretty good job of it. So excellent book. This is a hard one to get, but last time I checked, I think this was unavailable. But if you can get it, it's definitely well worth it. And the book, the actual book part of the book is all of this right here. And then the last is, this is all evidence. This is, the first part is Litigation Against the NSA by John St. Clair. Survey of Evidence Regarding Mind Control Experiments by Cheryl Walsh. Websites of Interest. So lots of fascinating stuff in this. And overall, really good kind of snapshot of the phenomenon of gang stalking. And this was, I believe, published in 2005. So there we go. Now, last but certainly not least, again, going back to what I was saying about original source material. This is another one of those books that's kind of a hard one to get, at least, it's not exactly cheap, but this is Physical Control of the Mind by Jose Delgado, Dr. Delgado. And this is all about exactly that. Dr. Delgado was one of the first guys to experiment with brain transmitters and receivers, what he called stemosevers, that could be implanted in the brain and used to control behavior, used to initiate violent behavior or curb violent behavior. And the most famous experiment that he did that is, of course, pictured in here. And this book is, let's see. This is from 1971. And I also have the hardback copy of this too, because to me, this is just a really important book of, again, the original source material. So when people say, oh, brain implants, that's crazy alien abduction stuff, you're like, well, not so much. This is a real thing. And Dr. Delgado was one of the mad scientists right in the heart of it. And there he is controlling a bull's aggression with a remote control. So what he did was he actually got into the ring with a bull to demonstrate his technology, and he had put this receiver in a bull's head, and when the bull charged at him, he hit this button and, shut off the rage in the bull. And his whole point was that these receivers could be used to modify behavior and eliminate violent behavior, but you start to see there's some obviously really dark overtones to this. And especially when you see the subtitle of his book, Toward a Psycho-Civilized Society. And you have to wonder what exactly the doctor considered a psycho-civilized society. There were a lot of these guys like Louis Jolyon West, who is another one of the kind of Franken doctors of the CIA that wanted to create a center for the study of violence up in the hills outside of LA. And he wanted to literally come down and abduct people, take them up to, he wanted to refit a Nike missile site up in the mountains as a secret laboratory where he would literally abduct these guys, put them in a van, and black bag them up to this site, this Nike missile site, and work on it. And you can find the original proposals are still out there in PDF form. I'll have to see if I can run them down and put a link to them somewhere. But he proposed this, I think, back when Reagan was president, or Reagan was governor of California. But his idea was he would take criminals off the street and they would take them up to a secret lab and kind of reprogram them to get rid of their violent thoughts. And officially, this was shot down as, no, this is a horrible, horrible idea. But this is one of those areas where it's hard to say, was it really? Did it really get shut down? And when you read the book Chaos, you have to wonder, was the chaos the byproduct of actually something exactly like that? We'll probably never know. But I find that especially interesting with regard to around the same time you had this surge in people reporting being abducted by aliens. At the same time, you had guys like Jolyon West and Delgado wanting to secretly mess with people's brains. And then, not long after that, you start having reports of people claiming that aliens abducted them and put receivers in their heads. So anyway, again, really important source material there. And now for the supplemental information, of course, we have this is Project MK Ultra and Mind Control Technology. This is just a book of patents, and it's just exactly that. It's just all patent information. It's just reprinted MK Ultra files. Great resource for those of you wanting to do research on this and just see kind of what all's out there. Because, and these are, I don't know what the newest patent is in this, but this was published in 2017. But when you start looking at some of the old patents for mind control technology, some of this stuff goes back a long time ago. So there was stuff that, from the early 70s that seems like super, crazy sci-fi technology even now. Now, last but not least, this is another one that some of you are going to be scratching your heads like, how is this mind control? But this is The Truth About the False Memory Syndrome Foundation. And this is by James G. Friesen, PhD. Excellent book, all about the False Memory Syndrome Foundation and who started it and what it's all about. And when you start to really dig into the founding members of it, you see that this whole organization was created to protect professional child abusers. And you're like, well, how does that fit in with MK Ultra and all that? Well, if you have children that have been experimented on and you have all this sort of thing happening, some of those people are going to find their way into a therapist's office. Some people are going to make it out of there and they're going to wind up spilling their guts. And when they do, you need something like this to discredit them. So this guy did a great job of exposing the False Memory Syndrome Foundation, which disbanded in, I believe, fall of 2019. But pretty much everybody in all the founding members had all been accused of child molestation by their children and were involved in some really messed up, incestuous, weird stuff. And there's no way that mass media with their resources didn't know the truth behind some of these people that were operating this. So once you know that, it's hard to imagine that these people would be taken seriously by anyone unless they're supposed to take them seriously. This was published in 1996. And I found this is one of my favorite half-price books finds. Excellent book about the False Memory Syndrome Foundation. But again, once you just see, and now thanks to the internet, you can easily look these people up and see what all their bona fides were, and it's horrifying. And Elizabeth Loftus and all of them, when you look at some of their relationships, their marriages, their kids, and some of the stuff they were knowingly involved in, some of the stuff they were openly engaging in and talking about, it's very difficult to take the False Memory Syndrome Foundation serious at all. So, and the whole point of it was to push off blame for any of this kind of stuff on the victim and say, this is all it's just crazy stuff happening in their head. It's not real, just a false memory implanted by a crazy therapist. So there you go. So there are my top 10 books on mind control. And then of course we have some runners up. And again, this is such an important topic and there's so much here that I definitely want to come back to this and maybe do maybe another top 20 or something like that. But hopefully those of you curious about this will give you some good jumping off points here. And I know many of you that are much more web savvy than I am can probably find some of this stuff in PDF form. I am a physical book kind of guy, so I really like having the actual book anytime I can get it, so I can write in it and take notes about it. But enough about that. I've gone way over time. But again, this is a really important topic. So hopefully you stayed with it through it and you're not asleep on your couch now. But if you are, hey, maybe I helped you battle some insomnia or something. So anyway, thanks for watching. I'll link to some of these on the end screen. So check those out. And let me know what you'd like to see in some future videos. I've got several books I'm working on right now that I've just gotten, and so many of you have recommended so many books to me. I'm getting hard to keep up with it, and my old brain here does not take the information in as fast as it used to. So as always, thanks for watching, thanks for supporting the channel, and big thanks to the members, because thanks to you all, that is how I fund new purchases for the channel. So I actually have a couple of new ones that have been recommended by many of you that I'll be covering very soon. So thanks for watching.